It's the WaitingForNextYear.com podcast. On the other end of the line is Scott Raab. It's been quite a while since we talked on the podcast. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm doing well. Do you have any idea how long it's been? Because I basically retired from media. Now, I just retired from Esquire and everything else. How long has it been since we talked, on the record?
The last time that I remember that we talked on the record was after the Cavaliers won. So it's possible we talked after that, but that's I should only remember that one.
Well, I mean that kind of, for me, that at that point, I had a second LeBron book to write really fast, and that was the summer. And the Cavs won on June 19th. I had to deliver a draft of the book in 4 months. So, and after that, also the feeling of, well, gosh, I saw them win. I saw a Cleveland team win a championship, and forget the part with a couple of books and the ESPN 30 for 30. Enough is enough. It's like the very, very. It remains a very satisfying thing. But I did feel that I wanted to talk with you, partly because of mainly because of the Brown. Hey, it's Google Maps. Sorry. If the Browns thing, especially the parade, kind of crystallized what for me is this insanity that I don't think I'm so much a part of. Not that I saw a championship and don't care about the Browns. I care very much. But I think it's easier from the outside, and I still live in New Jersey, to at least, hey, listen, nobody's right, but to frame the issue in ways that maybe might mean something to one person listening to us, I don't know.
Yeah, it was very interesting, the whole parade thing, because I had much more of an opinion on it a year before. For some reason, going 1-15 didn't salve too much of my wounds, and so going 0-16, I was kind of totally indifferent about the parade, and not just because I felt like I should be totally indifferent. I was actually truly indifferent.
I think the Google Maps speaks for itself, basically. Here's one of the things I actually. I had Chris McNeil reflog 18 block. Jeez, blocked for years on Twitter, and I don't know why. I mean, not now that since the presidential election, I have over 29,000 people. Wow. Are you sure this is doable? I can't. 29,000.
We can't hear anything. What? We can't hear the Google Maps.
Oh, that's good. Oh, yeah. Well, that's the best of both worlds. So I unblocked Chris around the 1-15 parade. Partly because I just admire someone who's willing to put himself out there. The guy's not like a media professional. He is not, as far as I could tell, in any way an attention-seeking guy, except to the extent that Twitter allows a guy, any of us, to build a critical mass of followers that really does make you a voice in the community. But what I didn't understand with the 1-15 parade, and understand even less with the perfect season parade, not that there was a parade for 1-15, but he caught a lot of flack the season before this, and this year was extraordinary. I do not understand this. We're still embarrassed. It's going to be an embarrassment on the city. It's a black eye for Cleveland. ESPN is, that kind of defensive posture, that kind of, don't let the world make fun of us. I thought, first of all, for me, that's been over forever. But the idea that people are still, so attuned to this idea that other people outside of Cleveland are going to think less of us. Forget the free agent part. I'm talking about the media part. The free agent part's a complete joke. But yeah, it's true that an 0-16 parade is going to get some media coverage because it's unique to Cleveland. I think that's a good thing. I've long since, I grew up, as you know, a long time ago, back when Cleveland was trying to come up with the right jingle or the right slogan to make Cleveland seem proud and meaningful. It was, if New York's the Big Apple, Cleveland's a plum. I remember when that was on buses when it was CTS before RTA, I believe. You know, it's just strange to me, and I don't get it. That part of the fan base that goes, "Oh my God, people are going to make fun of us." I don't get it.
No, and it dovetails with the Kyrie thing too. There were so many defensive posts and people, kind of, bristling up when Kyrie made the comments that he made about being in a real sports town in Boston, and I don't care. I understand where that comes from. I understand the differences between Boston and Cleveland. I think for some people, Boston is better. Or a big city is better. And I'm not under any delusion that Cleveland is Boston or New York or Chicago, and that's fine. That's why I'm here, because it's not those things. And so Kyrie making some statement doesn't impact me. Much in the same way that negativity around the parade like the people from Chicago who read sports blogs were going to think Cleveland was so cool, and until we had that parade.
Well, to me, it's apples and oranges, the comparison, because we don't have, give us 4 or 5 Super Bowl rings, a couple of World Series, and a dynastic basketball team, and we'll see which is the better sports town. Boston is more populated, and first of all, I'll never feel anything but love for Kyrie, because I don't think I need to go any further, but we're talking about a guy where a lot of things, that are, I think, fairly settled questions of science and the like, seem to be. I think Kyrie, to the extent I have any insight, is a really bright guy beyond his, brilliance on the basketball court. But getting baited into any kind of feelings about Kyrie saying, I'm in a better sports town or whatever, is kind of the same fool's errand as the parade stuff. I don't mean to call you a fool. I'm just saying it should be, water off a duck's back at this point. It's not that these aren't real human beings with their own experiences and their own feelings and their own beliefs. It's hard to respect a flat earther, but the whole world of sports, and then Cleveland sports placed within that, has been well established over many decades now. So the guy who hits the shot that helps end the drought, only a season later, a season and an off season, he's gone. The general manager that helped build that roster, he's gone too. I mean, this is how it is. It isn't. Every sports city is unique, but to me, Cleveland's the uniquest of all, and part of it is that Kyrie left. Kyrie left and left a trail, of that kind of bullshit in his wake. That's just how it is. It's not that I don't care as much. I think I do. It's that I don't care as much about stuff like that, because nothing. What's changed is the only thing that matters to a sports fan in my mind, which is that the Cavs won a championship under what. I mean, it seemed miraculous at the time. It only seems more miraculous now.
Oh, I definitely agree with that.
That's all that matters. I mean, it's great to have, the sports talk radio and the mainstream media, but those are businesses. Those are business partners of the team. I'm saying, unlike WFNY or, a lot of the other great spaces to go, to dig in as a fan and to have at it. I mean, Kyrie's a businessman. LeBron's a businessman, no less than Dan Gilbert. The idea that these players really have a particular attachment to a city or to a fan base, It's magical thinking. It's childish. It's not how. Listen, there are plenty of places where a mainstream media guy, whether it's a broadcaster or a print columnist, would have come up with a perfect season parade idea himself, or would have led the charge and wanted to be Grand Marshal in Philadelphia, in Boston, in Chicago, in New York City, and for all I know, in Los Angeles. You have a football team that's established, the level of hopelessness that the Browns have. And you wouldn't have Rizzo threatening to drive into the crowd of parade goers, But these are business partners, and part of it's the Stockholm syndrome, of believing that if the fans aren't showing up to see the Indians, it's a bad baseball town. I don't see anyone suggesting it's a bad football town when the Browns are drawing 30 or 40 or 45,000 people to a game.
Yeah, half of which are away fans.
It's horrible. I mean, I've only been there twice, and one, to a Browns game at Browns Stadium, and one was a Ravens game, and it was unbelievable. And the Muni lot is, to me, it's like, it's a Mad Max scenario now. Nobody's there because they give a shit about the football team, or let me put it way, nobody's there because they expect that shithole of a football team to win.
No,
they're there to get fucked up and act out, their sense of hopelessness and rage.
I took my family to the Cowboys game, obviously not this season, but the prior season, and it was a couple weeks after we'd been to Game 7 of the World Series, and it was a Dallas Cowboys home game in Cleveland, and right then and there, we made the decision that we were done with our Browns tickets for the foreseeable future, and I wasn't going to another. There was no joy in it. It was complete misery. The team never had a chance, and half the fans started rooting for Zeke Elliott in the middle of the game. This is not what I'm in it for.
It's kind of remarkable because, again, this old man perspective, it gets tiresome even to me. But I think Bernie Kosar threw his last pass as a Cleveland Brown 25 seasons ago, which means that there really is a whole generation, and really a generation and a half, that has no vivid living memory of a Browns team that you could really, you're old enough certainly to remember where every Brown Sunday, home or away, was an event to kind of build, a sense of community and a bond, whether it's family or friends. I used to go into New York City to one of the Browns backers clubs there. What was the point? What was the point of making the effort? I don't drink.
Well,
why should you take your kids if it's a miserable time?
Well, and that's the illusion that's been shattered over and over again here in Cleveland over the last 20 years, is just that, stinking is supposed to be in service of something. In a league with the draft, in a league with, parity and all these different things, you're supposed to pay your penance at the bottom of the league and then, someday have an up before your next downswing. And the Browns never had an upswing. They've had one playoff game in 20 years that they lost to the arch rival, like in dramatic come from behind fashion. It's one of the most unique franchise stories that we've seen in the last 30, 40 years. But it's not a story that anybody really enjoys telling, because there's nothing fun about it. There's no happy ending, at least not yet.
It really becomes difficult. Like I really appreciate what Jake Burns does on FNY and on Twitter, and I consider myself really knowledgeable about baseball. I mean, just in terms of strategies and the game within the game, and less so with basketball, and almost not at all with football. But I don't think it's an overstatement to say that football is, given the number of players on the field at any one time, every play, that it's a vastly more complex game in terms of the X's and O's. But even if you're well-versed in the X's and O's, the Browns are in the kind of state where you can't tell, I can't tell, I don't think any of us can tell anymore, what part is, the scouting, identifying the talent, drafting and developing the talent, coaching the talent. It's impossible to tell what will fix the Browns because they are so mired in football ineptitude, and as a result, or maybe it's not a result, maybe I've got cause and effect backwards, the culture of that team is so incredibly toxic. Just the idea that there's anything there that you can build on in a spiritual sense, and in character makes a difference. Character and spirit, I know they can't be quantified, but Bill James, the god of sabermetrics and someone who really expanded my universe in terms of being a baseball fan, he said, that whole veteran mystique, you can't prove clutch hitting, but it makes a difference when you have veterans who know what winning feels like as part of your leadership group in a locker room. And I think in football, which is really a warrior sport in ways, thank God, baseball and basketball aren't and will never be, I hope. In football, I think it's more true. I mean, you just can't overstate at this point that for a lot of us, and I think this was part of the problem with people's attitude toward the parade, is that you can hate on Hugh Jackson and you can hate on the new Browns order front office. You can certainly hate on Jimmy Haslam because the fish does rot from the head, and that guy is really a carpetbagging asshole of an owner. But you can't look at the Browns and go, well, it's Hugh Jackson's fault because he's not getting the most out of the talent he's been given. I can't tell. I'm no Hugh Jackson fan. I can't tell that that's true. And I certainly, you can talk about the lack of stability and all that, but I don't think keeping Ray Farmer around or Sashi Brown around would have made some palpable difference in the quality of the roster that the Browns. I mean, it's a league that's full of smart people in every front office. And as you pointed out, it has many. It's designed for parity and quickish turnarounds, and here we are.
Yes, here we are, and one of the parallels, though, that I think what you're talking about in terms of character and personality, that's one of the reasons that I'm so nervous about, and nervous as somebody can be after having won a championship a couple of years ago with the Cavaliers, but losing David Griffin feels like you're losing a huge amount of that character, that he brought a sense of, I don't want to call it philosophy because that feels like the wrong word, but he brought that sense of, well, this is more than just kind of treating players like buckets of stats. We're going to see how they fit together. We're going to mesh personalities. We're going to take the temperature of the team and how they respond to adversity and all these different, not wild concepts, but not things that you can necessarily put in a spreadsheet. And it feels like the Browns in the last 2 years specifically have really been missing a lot of that stuff, because I get into these huge arguments with people because, Joe Hayden is or is not washed up and Paul Kruger is or is not washed up. But like for me, it's more about process and, a lack of veteran leadership on a team, and you allow a guy like Paul Kruger and Joe Hayden to build a voice within a clubhouse through the entire training camp and then cut them on the last possible minute at the end of August. Like that, and it doesn't engender anything in the way of positive vibes in a team, locker room, coaching staff, etc. And the Browns make those mistakes on top of other mistakes on top of other mistakes. There's no patient zero.
It's really. I think it's important to keep in mind that while we're engaging in really heated and deeply felt arguments about these things, that's us. Not just you and me, but all of us who engage in this and do it, 365 days a year, every year. Nobody's paying us to do any of this stuff. And I think the men who are making these decisions, like the men who are out there on the field, for very good reasons, one of them, being reality, it's not like that. It just isn't like that. That doesn't mean that Joe Hayden wasn't a great Cleveland player and a guy who showed up at Cavs games and that he had no feelings. And it does, I guess Joe's a bad example because he's one of many examples of a player that the Browns let go for reasons that I think had very little to do with football. But it's these are calculations made by people who are making huge amounts of money and competing against other front offices who are likewise making huge amounts of money. And I don't know, how many more times I was psyched when the Browns hired Holmgren, as I think many Browns fans were. I was psyched when the Browns hired Hugh, as I think many Browns fans were. It's really hard at this point to feel much of anything but amusement and then frustration if you're getting into it with someone. Maybe the Joe Banner, Mike Lombardi regime by now would have produced a playoff contender. There's just no way for us to tell. What we know for sure is that we get really angry with each other about this stuff.
Right.
We care at an emotional level much more than Joe Hayden or John Dorsey or Sashi Brown does. We do.
And it's funny too because the fish rotting from the head and the Jimmy Haslam. The John Steiner at our site has always said that Cleveland fans are more obsessed with ownership than any other city he's ever seen. And Jimmy Haslam is probably one owner that should be obsessed about because we know so much about his problems in his other business and legal issues and everything else. And it's hard to have any kind of a conversation where you nitpick the coaching staff and the coordinators and the GM and the executive vice president of whatever and corporate attorneys when that guy, and you constantly read drip news stories about Pilot Flying J and ongoing trials and everything like that. It's really hard to just stick to football, and that's what really sucks too. I talked about that with Jake Burns. Is I just kind of want to talk about football, and we don't really have that luxury in Cleveland lately.
Well, and it's horrible to talk about when you see Taylor Gabriel in a Super Bowl and Corey Coleman with a broken whatever bone he's going to break next. They're essentially interchangeable players, except for the fact that Taylor Gabriel actually has a track record as an NFL receiver and has performed at a level where he's part of a. You know what I'm saying? If you can focus on the football, and it's suicidally dismal, but the thing to keep in mind with Haslam, as with Holmgren, but when Jimmy Haslam bought the team, I was psyched about that because here's a guy who was part owner of the Steelers. And let me digress here, because for years when I would go to Cavs games, like the playoff games, they'd show the picture of Ben Roethlisberger to get people to boo. People should really be ashamed unless they're literally farm animals in terms of intelligence. You can hate on the Yinzers and the Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger. The Browns are one of the worst franchises in the history of American professional sports. The Steelers are the opposite in every way. They are one of the most exemplary, consistently elite franchises in the history of professional sports. Maybe that's a reason to put up that Roethlisberger's picture to incur the tribal hatred, to get the crowd worked up. But it seems a little Pavlovian to me. When Jimmy Haslam bought the team, one of the things in his favor, in my mind, was he had been a part owner of the Steelers. He and Dee were going to move to Cleveland. They bought the mansion in Bracknell. They were going to be hands-on, just as hands-on as he claims to have been when he built his daddy's business into Pilot Flying J. But months after they bought the team, on April 15th, following the purchase of the team late the previous year, that's when the FBI raided Pilot Flying J. And suddenly all bets were off. Jimmy wasn't, Jimmy who again, that fish rotted from the head too, has done everything. If he had been planted by the NFL as revenge on Cleveland fans for making a stink when the real Browns left, if he had been a deliberate, double agent in order to torture Cleveland fans, he couldn't have done a better job than he's done. And so, I agree that people in Dallas can have whatever feelings, or Pittsburgh, whatever feelings. But to the extent that a team like the Cleveland Browns is a public utility not a regular business, to the extent that Joe Banner shows up at city council meetings and squeezes the city of Cleveland for a few more $1 million for new scoreboards for the billionaire owner, to the extent that Jimmy Haslam sells the naming rights to the stadium and shares none of that revenue with the city, there should be a concerted campaign right now to strip his ownership of the Cleveland Browns. I'm not saying it would work, but it would work a hell of a lot better, and again, along the same lines as Chris's perfect season parade. This man has no business owning a team in Cleveland, Ohio. They are not a civic asset at this point. They are a civic disgrace. And anyone who felt, free agents aren't going to come, and that parade was followed immediately by Dorsey hiring 2 longtime NFL executives from the Chiefs. So please, enough bullshit about how free agents aren't going to come. I don't want any more Kenny Britts or Dwayne Bowe's. I don't even want any more Paul Krugers. You know what I mean? I mean, yes, the draft is a crapshoot, but if you can't build a critical mass of talent primarily through the draft, I don't know how you're going to succeed in the NFL.
And, to your point, I know it's a problematic comparison to try and compare a pro sports franchise to like a McDonald's or something like that. And I'm not, it's crazy, but any other franchise in the universe would have stripped this owner. I think even the NBA under Silver would have considered stripping this ownership and forcing a sale of the team. It's not like Jimmy's going to lose money on the sale of the team. Even with all the money he pumped in and all the different things that he's done, if he was forced to sell tomorrow, he'd make cash.
According to the Forbes, the last Forbes numbers I saw, the team is worth $500 million more. That he paid. What he agreed to a deal that's slightly under $1 billion with Randy Lerner, and as far as I know, the franchise value is now $1.5 billion. That's one of the wonderful things about being a billionaire in America is you're too big to fail. Once you bought, especially an NFL franchise, because that really is a pure cartel in many ways, almost every way. But I was hopeful that maybe some of the flying jade, that some of the tapes and transcripts of the testimony, the actual conversations. I mean, their fraud practices were predatory in a very openly racist way, meaning they openly thought this would be much easier if we basically focused our fraud stuff on the Latino communities in the South, because they weren't as well versed in spreadsheets in the minds of the mavens that Jimmy Haslam hired, hands-on Jimmy. But outside of a true boycott type of thing, I don't know what would actually move the needle. It's a billionaires club, and people like to say it's private enterprise. That's Jimmy's team. That's fine. Let him pay for the fucking scoreboards. I'll never understand how LeBron James, one man whose net worth is estimated around $400 million, has managed to provide not just education, but college tuition scholarships, I believe now for over 3,000 people. And the Haslams and Dan Gilbert and the Dolans, who are local, are content to, hey, here's some new football fields for you. These aren't businesses like Geraci's Pizza. It's not a Mr. Hero franchise. These are businesses that act when it comes to the syntax or the requests of money from the city to keep Cleveland strong, all that bullshit. They are not normal businesses. And the Green Bay Packers model obviously is ideal, and it's magical thinking to believe that could ever happen. But that's really what it should be in Cleveland. I don't understand. The jury is... Sorry, Google Maps is talking up a storm. I don't know what it's going to take, but I know that getting lost, for me at least, getting lost in arguments about Baker Mayfield versus one of the Joshes, versus I don't know that I can wait that long, to find out There's something about, there's something, you don't hear any of that. You don't hear any of that Google Maps stuff.
No, I'm not hearing any of it at all.
That's fantastic. That's good to know. 1 in 15. There's no such thing as a good 1 in 15, but if there is such a thing as a bad 1 in 15, and that 1 in 15, where the team got progressively worse as time went by, certainly. I mean, there are people who whatever their acumen in terms of pro football, it was impossible to forecast this Browns team. The last season's Browns team as an 0-16 team, but there was no reason to think they would win more than 2-3 games. To finish 0-16 after a 1 in 15 season, and once again, there aren't any good winless seasons, but I saw no evidence whatsoever. I mean, Deshaun Kaiser had a very nice, last game against the Steelers, but there was no reason for any fan to finish that season going, well, at least we saw some signs that, Hugh Jackson's the right guy, Greg Williams is the right guy. We've got, this critical mass. I mean, you can certainly say Myles Garrett was promising when he was healthy enough to be on the field. You could say that much. But, coming into next season, I don't know what's realistic, no matter who they draft or don't draft. There's just, and by the way, and this is strictly based on my belief, I don't think Jimmy Haslam wanted to be paying multiple head coaches. I think that's one reason that Hugh Jackson still has the job. But I think another reason is it was the kind of teardown that it was without precedent in the NFL. And as much as I respect Paul DePodesta's track record, as much as I believe in analytics as part of the mix, the idea of what the Browns did with that roster was totally unfair to Hugh Jackson. Totally unfair to expect that guy to field the competitive team week in and week out. I don't think it really mattered where Greg Williams had Peppers playing. We can focus on that stuff. I'm not even saying Hugh deserves another full year. I just mean I can understand why Jimmy decided, not to pull that trigger. That's basically all I'm saying. It's not a defense of Hugh Jackson or Jimmy Haslam. It is a business. And maybe I'm dismayed that John Dorsey and Hugh Jackson both report separately to Jimmy Haslam. That's a recipe for more of the same toxicity, but that's the way it is right now.
I agree with that, and I long since stopped trying to defend Hugh Jackson as well, because he's done nothing in 2 years that warrants a full-on defense. I guess what I will say is that I don't feel like the Browns have committed long enough to anyone to make them the best versions of themselves. And when Hugh Jackson showed up here, I was really excited because I knew in my mind, in the evidence, we know that he can be a 7 or an 8 win coach. And I was hoping that over time and commitment and with the right kind of strategy around him that he could expand upon that, and maybe the idea that he didn't have enough time in Oakland and that he learned even more over the and graduated. And we have this weird savior complex and a hero complex where if it doesn't happen, we want to fire people. And Jimmy Haslam fed into that even more so in his first couple years by firing Chud right away and then running Banner and Lombardi out. And because the team doesn't perform, it's fool's gold for us when he fires somebody because, we exacted our revenge and finally we're going to get somebody who knows what they're doing. And maybe all those people knew what they were doing. It's not a matter of implementing in a minute, implementing in a second. And the Browns, from players to coaches to executives, have not gotten the best out of anybody that we've seen. And you even see it from Mike Pettin, and I assume Mike Pettin's going to have more of a career. Chud's going to have more of a career. Pat Shurmur's like a hot coaching name now. We never allow those guys to become what they can become here?
The hero complex thing, I think it's important to keep in mind that we're sports fans, we're passionate sports fans, and this is what sports is all about. It's not that Cleveland fans have a hero complex and fans in other cities don't. That's what it's all about. You know, that's exact. It's a hero villain, two-dimensional thing, and you know there isn't a fan in New England who doesn't have a hero complex, and not just about Belichick or Brady. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So our hero complex is you know, it's I'm trying to think of sexual metaphors, but none come to mind, and that's probably for the best. You know what I mean? It's like we're kind of desperate, and I don't know that any of these guys, you know, like Mangini. There are still people arguing that would have been, if we'd only kept Eric Mangini. I think it's kind of ludicrous. I hope that Pettin and Shermer and Mangini, you know, have long and productive NFL careers, and we'll never know what they could or couldn't have done in Cleveland. You know, Belichick, when he was a Browns coach, obviously was not an entirely different animal from the Belichick who's pretty much considered the greatest NFL coach who ever lived, at least by people who were born in the 1970s or later. But, you know, it would be nice to get a chance, you know, to find out about any of these guys, but that only comes with winning. You just can't. I mean, it goes back to the free agent parade stuff. The only thing that a professional football player, especially because the earning window there is very short, you know, it's winning and money. It's not whether the fans are loyal or whether it parades an embarrassment. That's all that matters is winning. And you know, you can hear from people in Kansas City who'll tell you that John Dorsey was fired for good reason and shouldn't get the credit that some people give him for building and maintaining a competitive franchise. It really doesn't matter at this point. What is his commitment and what is his performance, and who is judging that, and on what basis? And maybe Jimmy Haslam, I mean, we have to presume he's still owner, has learned from those whatever blunders he's willing to acknowledge, and maybe we'll see evidence of that learning. But the only way to measure it, like the only way to measure the success of any draft in the NFL, is, are they winning games?
Well, and that seems to be the difficult conversation, because after 2 seasons like the Browns just had, there's no way to envision them winning games. It's like they just have to do it. Even if a team goes out and wins 4 or 5 games, you can pick apart those 4 or 5 wins and try and find ways that they can expound upon that in the following season. But other than the Lions, it's uncharted territory trying to figure out how you talk about and analyze a team that just went 0-16 and look toward the future.
Yeah, it's so toxic and hopeless right now that I mean, if 0-16 isn't hitting bottom, I don't know what would be. You know, a team plane crash looks good from 0-16. You know, a franchise move looks good from 0-16. It's a really tough place to be, and it's not like I want to, to talk based on my strong sense of hope. It's more like, can we stop ripping each other's throats out about it?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, that's kind of the thing. It's same team. These players have more camaraderie amongst themselves than the Cleveland Browns fan base at this point. We're just tearing each other apart every single day.
Well, I've been guilty of that, and it's a pretty knee-jerk thing. I mean, it still happens with a friend of mine who I've known. He's also a Cleveland guy, native, and lives in New York now. And he sent me an email about, hey, maybe getting Terrell Pryor back. Maybe maybe and I'm thinking, this is the same guy who used to tell me it was good that the Browns lost that 13th game because we get a higher draft pick. Now it's like, how desperate do you have to be as a lifelong Cleveland Browns fan to think that maybe if Pryor walks through that locker room? I'm more concerned about, we've got one literal all-pro talent on that roster, and it's Josh Gordon. That's it. One guy. I'm not saying that Joe Thomas isn't coming back and that Joe Thomas isn't a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I'm saying that in terms of impact players who are going to make a difference in scoring actual points in an NFL game, where I, even a moron like me, can identify, that's the guy who gets the credit, no matter how good the pocket was maintained. I mean, that one guy, Josh Gordon, we have no reason to believe that he's going to be eligible to play next season.
No, I mean, if Vegas was putting a line on it, I think it would pay more to. The odds are not in his favor. They won't be for the next 5 years unless he does it for 2 or 3 years in a row. It's kind of nuts. It's a very, we're fans by birth, not by choice. That's how it feels to me. I think that's how it feels to most of us. And it's very tough. I interviewed Dwayne Wade a long time ago. He was still with the Heat. It was the training camp where LeBron had signed with the Heat, so the interview could not include by agreement. I couldn't ask any questions directly about Rob. But one of the things I said to Dwayne Wade, there's a lot of, I'm a Cleveland fan. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of pain. I just want to say that because you guys, are you guys? And he goes, that's right. He goes, 20, 30 years from now, your butt's still going to be in the seat. We'll have long since moved on, and that's fine. That's the way it has to be. But at least that plus the banner hanging from the rafters at the Q have at least helped my perspective to the point where, I hope I'm not as angry. Certainly not wondering whether I'll live to see a Cleveland team win a championship. I'm also, fully aware that the team that matters most in that town is the Cleveland Browns, and that for a Browns fan, things are so dark, and there's not only no light at the end of the tunnel, there's no apparent end to the tunnel at all. So has it ruined the rest of the NFL for you? Have you been able to continue to watch real teams play?
That happened when the Browns left. That plus the increasing mountain of evidence that it's a deadly sport, that the price it exacts from the men who play it is often fatal, and that the league has been literally criminally negligent in terms of stepping up and acknowledging that. But I did watch. I missed the greatest play in the history of the NFL, but I do watch a little playoff football. And it is remarkable the extent to which the game played by good NFL teams bears almost no resemblance to what the Browns look like a scrimmage team, basically, by comparison. So I'm not a football fan. I'm just as someone speaking, a sports fan. The NFL is just not even close to. I'd much rather watch an NBA game, but certainly Major League Baseball, which I love. So. Well,
is there anything else you wanted to touch on? I know we were going to go Browns heavy, but I am going to. This sounds horrible and self-promoting, but the last book, You're Welcome, Cleveland, came out in February of 2017 and tanked big time, which is fine. You don't have to give any money back. I mean, it's not fine, but a couple of local libraries, and I was as shocked as anyone because, as you know, and I've said many times, it's not. I don't make any secret about the fact that I don't live in Cleveland. I feel a certain embarrassment about the fact that of all the assholes who grew up there, went to college there, left there, and never let go of their fanhood, and in fact, it only increased over the years, that I'm the guy who wound up, making
I made a profit when LeBron James left. I made a profit when LeBron James came. You know what I mean? I mean, I didn't write those books for the money, and people can scoff at that all they want. But I had a well-established national magazine career before the Cavs, and long before the Cavs ever drafted LeBron. But there is, I'll be at this is a short way of saying I'll be at the Mentor Library on January 29th, the Lakewood Library on January 30th. Obviously, I'm not, I think they might have books for sale, but I just want to make clear, I'm coming back because I still come back to the city. I still support my alma mater, Cleveland State. I still feel like part of, Cleveland fan nation. And, when a library asks, I'm not going to say no because I feel honored by the ask. So I will be there later this month.
And you know what? And that's really cool that you do that. I've gone to see I've gone to hear a bunch of authors speak and read and do different things over the last couple of years. I don't know if your kids ever read Captain Underpants, but Dave Pilkey, the author of that gigantic kids series, is from Elyria originally. He came back and spoke, and that was the first time my son was ever starstruck by an author.
Nice.
And then Drew McGarry came in, and he read from one of his books and gave a talk and talked about Deadspin and answer questions.
He's a very special talent as a writer. Drew and a kid named, I say a kid, I'm 65 now, named David Roth, who I think is also at Deadspin now. These are two of my favorite, not just sports writers, but two of my favorite writers. I love library events, and like, it sounds like false modesty, and it's nothing false about it. I have much to be modest about. But the idea of a library in Cleveland asking me to come and talk is never going to not be like incredibly wonderful and miraculous to me.
So are you going to read from the book a little bit? Q&A? What is it?
I think, I'm going to do a minimal amount of reading. I'm going to try and just, I have so many anecdotes over so many years, including one that I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement about, but I think I'm probably going to break the non-disclosure agreements. I think I told it, I was at the library in Hudson at some point in early 2017. But, I basically want to tell stories, answer questions. But sorry, it's a Google Maps thing. I think it's really important to emphasize the business part of it. That for fans, it's real. I mean, I spent a year at ESPN. Not that anyone necessarily saw me. I've been in the media, or was in the media, for 30 plus years. I think it's important that people at least try and get the perspective of what these teams mean when you're not a diehard Cleveland fan who really is, either suffering or celebrating on a game-to-game basis. I think it's really hard for me to wrap my mind around the difference between, the Cleveland Public Power and the Cleveland Browns. They seem so vital and so fundamental a part of a civic life that it's really tough. Anyway, I'm not going to be doing lectures. I just want to have a good time. I don't have anything to sell. I'm not worried anymore about, building a career in the media if I ever was that worried. I want it to be fun.
Well, that's I'll make sure I get those dates in the notes so people know where you're going to be. It's so much fun to have you on the podcast. You were such a huge part of us building the audience over the years. We'll owe you for that forever. And more than that, it's just been awesome to have a relationship with you over the years and occasionally coming on and
just stop.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I'm getting confused now because I'm off the highway. We should probably sign off here.
All right. Well, thanks again, Scott. We'll see you soon.
Greg, Craig, thanks a million. Hi to everybody. And tell Jeff Nomina to unblock me, for fuck's sake.
Okay, I'll do that.
You know? I don't know why he blocked me. I richly deserve to be blocked by anyone. I get that part. But tell him to take me off block so I can read his shitty opinions.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.